The rain hammered against the windows of First Colonial Bank like bullets from an angry sky. Marcus Chen pulled his hood lower as he approached the entrance, his heart hammering against his ribs. 3 years of planning had led to this moment. 3 years of studying security footage, memorizing guard rotations, and mapping every camera angle in the building. Behind him, his crew moved like shadows through the parking lot. Jake Morrison, their tech specialist, carried a gym bag filled with signal jammers and hacking equipment. His pale hands shook slightly as he gripped the handles, but Marcus knew the kid was solid when it counted. Sarah Walsh moved with the fluid grace of a former gymnast, her lock-picking tools hidden in a makeup case that looked perfectly innocent. Bringing up the rear was Viktor Petrov, 250 pounds of muscle and barely contained violence, his face a map of old scars from his boxing days. They had chosen this bank for good reason. First Colonial sat on the outskirts of New Geneva, far enough from the city center that police response time would be at least 12 minutes. The building was old, built in 2157 when security systems were less sophisticated. Most importantly, their intelligence suggested minimal resistance. 3 guards total, all past retirement age, working what was essentially a babysitting job for the handful of safety deposit boxes that still contained physical valuables. Marcus pushed through the glass doors, immediately noting the positions of the security cameras. Jake had done his homework well. The electromagnetic pulse device hidden in his jacket would fry every electronic system in a 3-block radius when activated. They would have exactly 47 minutes before backup power kicked in and started broadcasting their location to the authorities. The lobby was nearly empty at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. An elderly woman shuffled toward the exit, clutching her purse like a lifeline. A businessman in an expensive suit typed furiously on his tablet while waiting in line. Behind the bulletproof glass, 2 tellers processed transactions with the mechanical efficiency of people who had performed the same tasks thousands of times. Marcus approached the information desk where a young receptionist looked up with a practiced smile. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you today?" "Safety deposit box access," Marcus said, producing forged identification documents that had cost him 15,000 credits. "Box number 2847. The receptionist's fingers danced across her holographic interface. "Of course, Mr. Davidson. I'll need to verify your biometrics and contact our vault manager." This was the critical moment. Jake's hacking had inserted Marcus's false identity into the bank's customer database, but they were counting on human laziness and routine to carry them through. The receptionist pressed her palm to a scanner, then gestured toward a corridor lined with artificial plants. "Mr. Rodriguez will meet you at the vault entrance. Please follow the blue line on the floor." Marcus nodded and began walking, his crew falling into position behind him. Sarah had already disabled 2 cameras with micro-drones that attached like insects and broadcast false feeds. Viktor hung back near the entrance, his bulk effectively blocking the main exit while appearing to study a brochure about investment opportunities. The corridor stretched for 30 meters before, ending at a heavy steel door marked Authorized Personnel. Only, Marcus checked his watch. 18 minutes until shift change, when their window of opportunity would slam shut. Everything depended on speed and precision now. A soft chime announced their arrival, and the door slid open to reveal a security checkpoint. 2 guards sat behind a reinforced desk, their attention focused on a sports broadcast playing on a wall-mounted screen. They looked exactly as intelligence had described: overweight, underarmed, and utterly unprepared for what was about to happen. "Afternoon, gentlemen," Marcus said, keeping his voice casual and friendly. "Here to access my safety deposit box." The younger guard, whose name tag read Patterson, barely glanced up from the game. "ID and access code, please." Marcus handed over the documents while Jake moved closer to the electronic locks. The plan was simple. Disable the guards quietly, access the vault, grab the contents of specific high-value boxes, and disappear before anyone realized what had happened. Intelligence suggested the vault contained artifacts from recent archaeological expeditions, items that certain collectors would pay millions for without asking awkward questions about their origins. Patterson scanned the ID with equipment that was at least 20 years out of date. The verification took longer than it should have, and Marcus felt sweat beating on his forehead despite the cool air conditioning. Finally, a green light flashed, and the guard gestured toward a second door. "Vault's through there." Mr. Rodriguez should be waiting for you. But as they approached the entrance to the main vault area, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. The door was already open and light spilled out from beyond. According to their intelligence, the vault manager should have been on his lunch break for another 20 minutes. Jake caught his arm. Something's wrong. The electromagnetic signatures are all messed up. There's equipment in there that's not on any of the building schematics. Before Marcus could respond, a voice echoed from within the vault, calm and measured like someone reading from a manual. Unauthorized access detected. Initiating security protocols. Please state your name and purpose. The voice belonged to a man, but there was something about its tone that raised the hair on Marcus's neck. It wasn't the panicked response of a surprised bank employee. It was the voice of someone who had been expecting them. Victor stepped forward, his hand moving toward the concealed weapon beneath his jacket. Boss, we should abort. This feels like a setup. But Marcus had invested too much to walk away now. 3 years of his life. Every credit he had saved and the promise of enough money to disappear forever. He signaled for Jake to activate the electromagnetic pulse device. Do it, he whispered. Jake pressed the hidden switch, and every light in the building flickered and died. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in a red glow that made the corridor look like the inside of a wound. From within the vault came the sound of heavy footsteps, measured and deliberate. Then the voice again, unchanged by the power failure. Backup systems online. Threat assessment in progress. Please identify yourselves or prepare for defensive measures. Marcus drew his pistol, a military-grade plasma weapon that could punch through body armor like tissue paper. Behind him, his crew followed suit, their faces grim in the crimson light. They had come too far to turn back now, but as they advanced toward the vault entrance, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far more dangerous than a simple bank robbery. The figure that emerged from the vault was not what Marcus had expected. Instead of a panicked bank manager or confused security guard, a man stepped into the red emergency lighting with the fluid confidence of someone completely at home in dangerous situations. He was average height, maybe 40 years old, with graying hair cut in a military style and scars that spoke of violence survived rather than avoided. What made Marcus's finger hesitate on the trigger was the man's clothing. He wore what looked like ceremonial armor, but closer inspection revealed it was functional equipment. The dark material seemed to absorb the emergency lighting, and strange symbols were etched into metal plates at his shoulders and chest. Most disturbing of all, he appeared completely unaffected by Jake's electromagnetic pulse. Soft blue lights pulsed along the edges of his armor, and a device on his wrist projected a holographic display that should have been impossible with all electronics in the area supposedly dead. My name is David Marshall, the man said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. I am a certified tomb guard 3rd class, assigned to protect the artifacts currently stored in this facility. You are attempting to steal items that have been classified as culturally and scientifically invaluable to human civilization. Victor let out a nervous laugh. Tomb guard? What the hell is that supposed to mean, old man? Marshall's expression didn't change, but his stance shifted slightly. Marcus had seen enough combat veterans to recognize the subtle positioning of someone preparing for violence. I spent 12 years protecting archaeological sites on 17 different worlds, mostly human colonies, but also Martian ruins and 3 sites containing artifacts of unknown origin. My job was to ensure that grave robbers, treasure hunters, and black market dealers never got their hands on items that belong in museums or research facilities. Sarah kept her weapon trained on him but glanced nervously at Marcus. Boss, his gear is still working. The EMP should have fried everything electronic in here. Marshall tapped the device on his wrist. Hardened military equipment designed to function in environments with heavy electromagnetic interference. Standard issue for anyone working near alien artifacts, some of which emit energy signatures that would disable civilian electronics. He paused, studying each of them in turn. You did your homework on bank security, but you failed to research what was actually being stored here. Jake's voice cracked slightly. It's just a bank vault, safety deposit boxes, and old jewelry. 6 months ago, this facility was contracted to provide secure storage for items recovered from the Kepler 442b excavation. Among other things, you'll... Find fragments of technology that predate human space travel by approximately 50,000 years. Artwork from the lost colony of New Byzantium, and 3 data cores containing information that could revolutionize our understanding of faster-than-light travel. Marcus felt the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. This wasn't the simple smash-and-grab operation he had planned. Look, Marshall, we don't want any trouble. We're just here for some specific items. Nobody has to get hurt. Marshall's laugh was cold. You brought military-grade weapons into a secure facility with the intention of stealing artifacts that represent humanity's heritage. 4 generations of archaeologists died recovering some of these items from hostile environments. You think I'm going to let you walk out of here because you promised not to hurt anyone? Victor raised his weapon, a shotgun loaded with armor-piercing rounds. Enough talking. 1 old man against 4 of us? I like those odds. But Marshall was already moving. He dove to one side as Victor fired, the blast scorching the wall where he had been standing. The tomb guard rolled behind a support pillar and came up with a weapon that Marcus didn't recognize. It looked like a cross between a rifle and some kind of scientific instrument, with crystal components that glowed with internal light. Sonic disruptor, Marshall called out, his voice echoing in the corridor. Designed for neutralizing threats without damaging sensitive artifacts. Fair warning, it's going to hurt. The weapon emitted a sound like breaking glass mixed with a tuning fork struck by lightning. Victor screamed and dropped his shotgun, clutching his head as blood began trickling from his ears. Sarah staggered backward, her aim going wild as she fought against waves of nausea and disorientation. Marcus forced himself to stay focused, despite the painful ringing in his skull. He squeezed off 3 shots with his plasma pistol, the energy bolts lighting up the corridor like miniature suns. Marshall moved with impossible speed, seeming to anticipate each shot before Marcus fired. The bolts struck walls and equipment, leaving molten scars in the metal. "Jake, get the doors," Marcus shouted over the chaos. But Jake was on his knees, vomiting violently as the sonic weapon continued its assault on their nervous systems. His hacking equipment lay scattered around him, useless without the fine motor control needed to operate it. Marshall emerged from cover, still firing the disruptor in controlled bursts. 12 years of fighting tomb robbers on worlds where the gravity could crush a normal human, where the atmosphere would dissolve your lungs, where the native wildlife considered us an exotic snack. You think 4 criminals with stolen weapons are going to be a challenge? Sarah tried to circle around behind him, but Marshall spun and fired a different weapon, something that projected a net of crackling energy. She hit the ground hard, convulsing as electrical current coursed through her body. Victor had recovered enough to charge forward with a combat knife, his bulk giving him momentum despite his injuries. Marshall sidestepped the attack and struck with precise movements that suggested years of hand-to-hand combat training. The big man went down like a felled tree, unconscious before he hit the floor. Marcus found himself alone, his crew either disabled or incapacitated. The tomb guard stood in the center of the corridor, not even breathing hard, his weapons still humming with deadly energy. "Here's what's going to happen," Marshall said, his voice conversational despite the violence that had just occurred. "You're going to tell me who hired you, what specific items they wanted, and how you knew about the artifacts stored here. Then you're going to help me understand how civilian criminals obtained military-grade equipment and detailed intelligence about a classified storage facility." Marcus kept his weapon trained on Marshall, but his hands were shaking. "And if I don't?" Marshall smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "I've spent years dealing with people who thought ancient artifacts were just another way to get rich. Grave robbers who would rather destroy irreplaceable historical sites than leave empty-handed. Black market dealers who sold pieces of human heritage to the highest bidder regardless of their scientific value." His grip tightened on the sonic disruptor. "I take my job very seriously, Mr. Chen." The use of his real name hit Marcus like a physical blow. "How did you—" "Your forged ID was good enough to fool the bank's security, but not good enough to fool military-grade recognition software. I've known who you were since you walked into the building." Marshall gestured toward the vault entrance. "Now, shall we continue this conversation somewhere more comfortable? I have a feeling this is going to take a while." Marcus realized that His carefully planned heist had become something else entirely. He wasn't just a bank robber anymore. He was a prisoner of someone who had dedicated his life to protecting humanity's most precious treasures, and who had no intention of letting him leave until he had answers. Marshall gestured toward the vault with his sonic disruptor, and Marcus had no choice but to comply. His crew lay unconscious or groaning in the corridor behind them, their weapons scattered and useless. As they walked deeper into the facility, Marcus began to understand why his intelligence had been so catastrophically wrong. The vault wasn't the simple storage room he had expected. Instead, it opened into a complex that stretched far beyond the building's original blueprints. Climate-controlled chambers lined the walls, each containing artifacts that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Holographic displays provided detailed information about each item, and Marcus caught glimpses of words that made his blood run cold. Precursor technology, unknown origin, potentially dangerous. "Welcome to Storage Facility 7, Marshall said, noting Marcus's expression. "One of 12 secure locations where humanity stores its most important archaeological discoveries. The bank vault upstairs is just the public face. Down here is where we keep the things that could reshape civilization or destroy it, depending on who gets their hands on them." Marcus stumbled as the full scope of his situation became clear. "This whole thing was a setup. You knew we were coming." "We've been tracking your organization for 8 months," Marshall confirmed, leading him deeper into the complex. "Ever since someone started selling information about classified archaeological sites to black market collectors. Your crew wasn't the target. You were just the delivery method for something much bigger." They passed a chamber containing what looked like a crystalline sculpture that seemed to bend light around itself. In another, a metal device covered in symbols pulsed with rhythmic energy. Marcus had spent years studying rare artifacts for potential theft, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for this level of advanced technology. "The Kepler 442b excavation," Marshall continued, "yielded the most significant archaeological find in human history. A cache of technology left behind by a species that achieved interstellar travel, while Earth was still in its ice age. 3 governments and 4 major corporations would kill to get their hands on even fragments of that material." Marshall stopped at a security station and pressed his palm to a scanner. The device chirped softly and a holographic display materialized, showing tactical information about the facility. Marcus could see his crew's positions in the corridor above, monitored by sensors he hadn't even known existed. "Your employer made one critical mistake," Marshall said, manipulating the display to show communication logs. They assumed that tomb guards were just glorified security officers, museum guards with fancy titles and outdated equipment. A new section of the display activated, showing Marshall's service record. Marcus read the entries with growing horror. 12 years of active duty protecting archaeological sites across human space. Combat deployments on worlds where the native environment was actively hostile to human life. Specialized training in xenoarchaeology, artifact preservation, and what the files euphemistically called hostile contact protocols. "The Centauri expedition, 2159, Marshall said, pointing to one particular entry. Grave robbers had been systematically looting burial sites belonging to an extinct civilization. When we arrived, they had already contaminated 3 sites with industrial mining equipment. The artifacts they damaged contained historical records spanning 20,000 years of development." Marcus found his voice. "What happened to them?" Marshall's expression hardened. "I was authorized to use whatever force necessary to protect the sites. The robbers had military-grade equipment, local government corruption on their side, and a 6-month head start. It took me 3 weeks to track them down and recover what remained of the artifacts." The holographic display shifted to show photographs that made Marcus's stomach turn, advanced weapons that could have come from science fiction movies, armor that seemed to blur and shift as if it existed partially in another dimension, equipment that defied easy categorization, looking more like archaeological specimens than functional technology. "Standard tomb guard equipment," Marshall explained, "developed using technology recovered from sites like this one. When you're protecting artifacts that represent the pinnacle of multiple civilizations' achievements, you need tools that can match that level of sophistication." Marcus backed away from the display, his weapon forgotten in his hand. "This is insane. We just wanted some jewelry and old coins." Nobody told us about alien technology or government conspiracies. Your employer knew exactly what they were sending you after, Marshall said, accessing another file. 3 specific items from the Kepler 442b cache. A data core containing star charts that show the locations of 17 other archaeological sites. A device that our scientists believe functions as a universal translator for over 400 known languages. And this. The display showed an object that looked deceptively simple. A metal cylinder about the size of a wine bottle, covered in intricate patterns that seemed to move when viewed directly. But the information accompanying it made Marcus's blood run cold. A terraforming controller, Marshall read from the file, capable of altering the atmospheric composition and geological structure of an entire planet. The previous owners used it to make hostile worlds habitable for their species. In the wrong hands, it could be used as a weapon to make habitable worlds uninhabitable. Marcus lowered his weapon, the full weight of the situation crushing down on him. Someone wanted us to steal a planet killer? Someone wanted to acquire the most dangerous artifacts in human possession, while making it look like a simple criminal enterprise, Marshall corrected. If you had succeeded, the theft would have been blamed on common criminals. The real buyers could have claimed plausible deniability, while obtaining technology that would give them leverage over entire star systems. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the complex, and Marshall's posture shifted to high alert. Backup security forces, he explained, but they should still be 15 minutes away. He frowned at his wrist display. Unless? The lights in the complex flickered and changed from white to amber, and a computerized voice began speaking. External security breach detected. Multiple unauthorized entries in progress. Facility lockdown initiated. Marshall cursed and began rapidly manipulating his control interface. Your employer didn't just send one team. You were the distraction while the real thieves hit the facility from another direction. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. How many others? 12 hostiles, advanced equipment, and they're already inside the lower levels. Marshall's expression became grim as he studied the tactical display. They've disabled the primary security systems and are moving toward the high-value storage areas. The Tomb Guard turned to Marcus with an expression that mixed professional calculation with something approaching respect. I'm going to make you an offer, Mr. Chen. Help me stop them from reaching the terraforming device, and I'll make sure you and your crew are treated as cooperating witnesses rather than enemy combatants. Marcus stared at the display showing hostile forces moving through the facility with military precision. What makes you think I can help? You just demonstrated that I'm completely outclassed here. Marshall smiled grimly and began removing additional weapons from hidden compartments in the security station. Because those artifacts down there represent humanity's best hope of understanding our place in the universe. Someone is trying to steal that future and sell it to the highest bidder. He offered Marcus a weapon that hummed with unfamiliar energy. I've spent 12 years protecting humanity's heritage. Right now, I need someone who knows how criminals think to help me stop the biggest theft in human history. Marcus looked at the weapon, then at the display showing the invaders getting closer to their objective. Whatever he had gotten himself into was far beyond a simple bank robbery. It was about to become a fight for the future of human civilization. Marcus took the weapon Marshall offered, surprised by its weight and the way it seemed to vibrate with contained energy. I don't even know how to use this thing. Point and squeeze, Marshall said, adjusting settings on his own arsenal of equipment. The targeting system will handle the rest. Try not to hit any of the artifacts. Some of them are more volatile than they look. The facility's alarm system continued its urgent warnings as Marshall led them deeper into the complex. Marcus caught glimpses of chambers containing wonders that belonged in science fiction, rather than reality. Crystalline matrices that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, metallic sculptures that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and devices whose purposes he couldn't even begin to guess. How long have you been guarding places like this? Marcus asked as they moved through a corridor lined with climate-controlled storage units. Since I was 23, Marshall replied, checking his tactical display. Lost my entire unit on Proxima Centauri when we encountered technology that we weren't prepared for. Spent 2 years in military hospitals learning to walk again. When I got out, the Tomb Guard Corps offered me a chance to make sure nobody else would have to go through what I did. They reached a junction where the corridor split into 3 directions. Marshall consulted his wrist display and frowned. They've split into 3 teams: professional military formation, advanced jamming equipment, and they're moving like they know exactly where they're going. Inside information, Marcus said grimly. Same as we had, but better. Much better. Marshall activated additional sensors and the holographic display expanded to show the entire facility in 3 dimensions. They've bypassed 17 security checkpoints and neutralized 4 automated defense systems. Either they have someone on the inside or they've been planning this operation for months. Marcus studied the display and felt a chill of recognition. That movement pattern, I've seen it before. Victor used to run with a mercenary outfit called the Iron Wolves. Military contractors who hired themselves out to corporations for asset recovery operations. Marshall's expression darkened. Corporate warfare. Someone with serious resources wants those artifacts badly enough to risk starting an interstellar incident. He began distributing additional equipment to Marcus, a communications device, emergency medical supplies, and what looked like a grenade made of crystalline material. If things go bad, Marshall explained, that's a stasis field generator. It will freeze everything in a 30-meter radius for approximately 10 minutes. Don't use it unless you absolutely have to. The energy discharge could damage sensitive artifacts. They moved deeper into the facility, following corridors that seemed to stretch for kilometers beneath the surface. Marcus began to understand that the bank above was merely the tip of an iceberg that extended far underground. This wasn't just a storage facility. It was a research complex where humanity's greatest minds studied the legacy of civilizations that had reached the stars before humans learned to make fire. Contact, Marshall whispered, holding up a hand for silence. Through a reinforced window, Marcus could see 3 figures in advanced combat armor moving through what appeared to be a laboratory. They moved with military precision, but their equipment was unlike anything he had ever seen. Their armor seemed to absorb light, making them difficult to track visually, and their weapons projected energy fields that made the air shimmer. Iron Wolves, Marcus confirmed, recognizing the distinctive movement patterns. But that equipment isn't standard military issue. Where did they get technology like that? Marshall's face was grim as he studied the intruders. That's precursor-derived technology, reverse-engineered from artifacts similar to the ones stored here. Someone has been developing weapons based on alien designs. One of the Iron Wolves approached a secured storage unit and began working on its locking mechanism with a device that seemed to phase through solid matter. Within seconds, the supposedly impregnable security system simply dissolved, allowing access to contents that were worth more than some planetary government's annual budgets. We can't let them reach the terraforming device, Marshall said, checking his weapons one final time. If they succeed in stealing it, every inhabited world in human space becomes a potential target. Marcus felt the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. How do we stop them? They have better equipment, better training, and more people. Marshall smiled with cold confidence. They have better equipment and more people, but I have something they don't, which is 12 years of experience protecting artifacts that don't want to be protected. Marshall activated a control on his wrist, and the facility's lighting shifted to an eerie blue-white illumination. Some of the technology stored here is still partially active. The original owners built in defensive protocols that activate when their artifacts are threatened. As if responding to his words, a low humming sound began resonating through the complex. The very walls seemed to vibrate with harmonic frequencies that made Marcus's teeth ache. In the laboratory ahead, the Iron Wolves stumbled and raised their weapons, looking around in confusion as their equipment began malfunctioning. The precursor technology recognizes the energy signatures of stolen artifacts, Marshall explained. When it detects weapons derived from their civilization being used against their storage facilities, it responds accordingly. The 3 Iron Wolves tried to exit the laboratory, but found their path blocked by energy barriers that had materialized from nowhere. Their advanced armor sparked and flickered as competing technologies fought for dominance in the same space. Marshall moved forward with purposeful strides, his own equipment seeming to harmonize with the facility's defensive systems rather than conflict with them. Tomb Guard gear is designed to work with alien technology, not against it. We don't try to dominate or override their systems. We learn to cooperate with them. Marcus followed, amazed by what he was witnessing. The Iron Wolves' superior equipment was turning against them as the facility's ancient defenses awakened. Their weapons stopped functioning, their armor lost power, and their communications equipment dissolved into static. But Marshall's equipment continued operating flawlessly, his weapons charging with increased energy, and his tactical displays showing information that seemed to come from sources throughout the complex. "Surrender your weapons and identify your employer," Marshall commanded as they entered the laboratory. His voice was amplified by systems that made it seem to come from everywhere at once. The Iron Wolves' leader tried to respond, but found that his communications system had been completely disabled. He gestured frantically to his companions, but their coordination was breaking down as their equipment continued to fail. Marcus watched in fascination as Marshall demonstrated what it truly meant to be a tomb guard. This wasn't just about having better weapons or superior training. It was about understanding that some technology required partnership rather than mastery, cooperation rather than dominance. The original owners of these artifacts, Marshall explained as he secured the disabled Iron Wolves, built them to recognize the difference between those who sought to preserve and those who sought to exploit. "They've been testing us for decades, and some of us have learned to pass those tests." But even as they secured the first team of intruders, Marcus's blood ran cold as he looked at Marshall's tactical display. 2 more teams were still moving through the facility, and they were getting closer to the most dangerous artifacts in human possession. The fight was far from over, and Marcus was beginning to realize that the real battle wasn't just about stopping a theft. It was about proving that humanity deserved to inherit the legacy of civilizations that had reached for the stars. The facility's defensive systems continued their harmonic resonance as Marshall and Marcus moved deeper into the complex, but the remaining Iron Wolves had adapted to the changing conditions. Through his tactical display, Marshall could see that they had switched to purely mechanical equipment, abandoning their high-tech advantages in favor of reliability. "Smart," Marshall muttered, studying their movement patterns. "Someone trained them well." Marcus checked his unfamiliar weapon nervously. "How do we fight an enemy that's willing to give up superior technology to gain tactical advantage?" "We remind them why humans earned the right to inherit this place," Marshall replied, leading them through a corridor lined with artifacts that seemed to respond to their presence with gentle luminescence. The species that built these facilities didn't just leave technology behind. They left tests. They entered a vast chamber that Marcus hadn't seen on any of the facility blueprints. The ceiling stretched up into darkness, and the walls were covered with murals depicting scenes from civilizations that had spanned the galaxy. In the center of the room stood a crystalline obelisk that pulsed with rhythmic light, surrounded by artifacts arranged in precise geometric patterns. "The heart chamber," Marshall explained, "where the most dangerous items are stored. The terraforming device is in there, along with technology that could either elevate humanity to the next level of civilization or destroy us completely." Marcus could see figures moving in the shadows at the far end of the chamber. The remaining Iron Wolves had reached their objective, but they seemed hesitant to approach the central obelisk. Their leader was consulting some kind of handheld device while his companions maintained a defensive perimeter. "They're afraid," Marcus observed. "They should be," Marshall said grimly. Every species that discovered these storage facilities faced the same choice: take what they could steal and run, or prove they were worthy of true partnership with the technology. As they watched, one of the Iron Wolves stepped toward the obelisk. Immediately, the chamber filled with a sound like singing crystal, and the murals on the walls began to move, depicting scenes of civilizations rising and falling across the cosmos. The artifact displays rearranged themselves, creating a maze-like pattern that seemed designed to confuse and disorient intruders. But the Iron Wolf pressed forward, using a mechanical cutting tool to break through the energy barrier protecting the obelisk. Sparks flew as advanced technology met brute force, and the chamber's harmonic singing turned into something that sounded almost like screaming. "They're damaging the containment systems," Marshall said, his voice tight with anger. "If they destabilize the wrong artifact, they could trigger a cascade failure that would level half the city." Marcus found himself moving without conscious thought, following Marshall as they approached the intruders. The weapon in his hands felt natural now, its alien design somehow intuitive in a way that surprised him. "What makes humans special?" he asked as they took cover behind a rearranged display case. "Why do we deserve this technology?" Marshall smiled grimly as he prepared his equipment for combat. Because we're the only species the precursors ever encountered that was willing to sacrifice immediate gain for long-term preservation. Every other civilization they tested tried to take everything at once. Humans learned to be patient. The Iron Wolves had almost breached the obelisk's defenses when Marshall stepped into the open, his weapons powered but not yet aimed. "Stand down," he commanded. "You're about to trigger security protocols that will kill everyone in this facility." The Iron Wolves' leader turned, revealing a face scarred by battles on a dozen worlds. Marcus recognized him from Victor's old unit descriptions. Colonel Hayes, a man who had never lost a mission and never left valuable assets behind. "Tombguard," Hayes said, his voice carrying the respect of one professional for another. "We're not here to destroy anything. We have a buyer who will preserve these artifacts better than your government bureaucrats ever could. By selling them to the highest bidder, Marshall's weapons began charging with audible power buildups. These aren't commodities, Colonel. They're humanity's inheritance." Hayes signaled to his team and they spread out in a classic military formation. Despite their lack of high-tech equipment, they moved with lethal precision. "Humanity's inheritance belongs to whoever is strong enough to claim it. Your organization has kept these technologies locked away, while people suffer from problems that alien science could solve, because releasing unstable technology without understanding its consequences is how civilizations destroy themselves," Marshall replied. The precursors left guidelines for a reason. The standoff stretched for long seconds, with both sides knowing that the first shot fired would likely trigger a devastating battle in a room filled with technology that could reshape reality. Marcus found himself thinking about the journey that had brought him here, from planning a simple heist to standing between humanity's future and those who would exploit it for personal gain. Then Hayes made his decision. He raised his weapon toward the obelisk, clearly intending to destroy the containment systems rather than risk leaving empty-handed. Marshall moved with inhuman speed, his Tombguard training and enhanced equipment allowing him to cross the chamber in seconds. But Marcus was already moving too, driven by an understanding that had been building throughout the night. This wasn't about preserving artifacts for museums or government research. This was about proving that humanity could be trusted with the tools to reach the stars. Marcus tackled Hayes just as the colonel fired, sending the shot wide of its intended target. The two men hit the ground hard, wrestling for control of the weapon while the obelisk's defensive systems flared to life around them. Marshall engaged the other Iron Wolves with weapons that seemed to anticipate their movements. The chamber filled with energy discharges and the sound of advanced technology pushed to its limits. But Marcus barely noticed the larger battle, focused entirely on preventing Hayes from destroying containment systems that had preserved alien wonders for millennia. "You don't understand," Hayes grunted as they struggled. "The buyer has plans for this technology that will benefit all of humanity. Your organization is holding back progress. You want to progress toward what?" Marcus demanded, using moves he had learned during his years in less legitimate professions. "Turning every planet into a weapon? Selling humanity's future to corporations?" Hayes broke free and drew a backup weapon, but Marcus was faster. The alien technology in his hands responded to his intent, firing a containment field that trapped the colonel in a cage of crystalline energy. Around them, Marshall had disabled the remaining Iron Wolves using a combination of superior equipment and tactical knowledge that came from years of protecting sites like this one. But the real victory came when the obelisk itself began to respond to the battle that had taken place in its presence. The crystalline structure pulsed with new patterns of light, and the chamber's murals shifted to show new scenes. Humans working alongside alien technology, exploring distant worlds and building civilizations that spanned the galaxy. The message was clear. The test had been passed not by demonstrating superior firepower, but by choosing preservation over exploitation. The precursors were watching, Marshall said, his voice filled with awe as he studied the changing displays. They built safeguards into every facility, every artifact, every piece of technology they left behind. They wanted to see if we would choose wisdom over power. Marcus looked around the chamber, seeing the artifacts with new understanding. This wasn't just about stopping a theft. It was about proving that humanity deserved to inherit the universe. The aftermath of the battle settled over the heart chamber like dust after an explosion. The obelisk continued its new light patterns, and Marcus could hear systems throughout the facility responding with harmonic frequencies that suggested fundamental changes were occurring. The Iron Wolves lay unconscious or restrained. Their mission failed, and their advanced equipment rendered useless by technology they had never truly understood. Marshall was examining his tactical display with an expression of amazement. The facility's entire operational status has changed. Security protocols that have been dormant for decades are coming online. Communication channels that we never knew existed are opening up. Marcus stood near the captured Colonel Hayes, still trying to process what had happened. The test, it was all a test. Every archaeological site we've ever discovered, Marshall confirmed, manipulating controls that were now responding to his touch in ways they never had before. The precursors didn't just leave technology behind when they disappeared. They left a massive evaluation system designed to determine whether successor species were ready for true partnership. The chamber's murals continued to shift, showing new scenes that seemed to depict possible futures. Human explorers working alongside alien technology to terraform dead worlds, bringing life to barren systems. Scientists unlocking the secrets of faster-than-light travel that didn't just move ships between stars, but connected civilizations across the galaxy. Engineers building structures that spanned solar systems, using principles that transformed matter and energy at the quantum level. But other scenes showed darker possibilities. Technology misused for weapons of mass destruction, civilizations destroying themselves with power they couldn't control, entire species reduced to slavery by those who had stolen rather than earned their inheritance. The choice is still ours, Marshall said quietly. Passing the test doesn't guarantee anything. It just means we've proven we can be trusted with the opportunity to succeed or fail on our own merits. Marcus looked down at the weapon in his hands, noticing that it had changed during the battle. The alien design now incorporated elements that seemed somehow familiar, as if the technology was adapting to human aesthetics and preferences. What happens now? Before Marshall could answer, new figures appeared at the chamber entrance. Marcus tensed, expecting another wave of attackers, but these were clearly different. They wore the same style of armor as Marshall, but their equipment was even more advanced, incorporating technologies that seemed to blend seamlessly with their users. Tomb Guard Alpha Team, Marshall said with relief. The facility's new communication systems must have alerted headquarters to what was happening here. The team leader approached, removing her helmet to reveal a woman whose eyes held the same depth of experience that Marcus had seen in Marshall. David, the entire Tomb Guard network just went active. Every facility we monitor is reporting the same phenomenon. Someone passed the precursor evaluation. Marcus stepped forward. That would be us, I think. The woman studied him with interest. You're one of the bank robbers. Our intelligence suggested you were working for black market dealers. He chose to protect rather than exploit, Marshall explained. When Colonel Hayes tried to destroy the containment systems rather than leave empty-handed, Marcus stopped him. The precursors were watching and they approved of his choice. Marcus felt heat rising in his face. I'm not a hero. I just realized that some things are more important than money. The team leader smiled. According to our readings, that realization is exactly what the precursors were looking for. The willingness to sacrifice immediate gain for long-term preservation. The ability to see beyond personal profit to species-wide responsibility. Additional tomb guards were entering the chamber, along with scientists and technicians whose equipment was already interfacing with systems that had been dormant for millennia. Marcus watched in fascination as human technology and precursor artifacts began working together with unprecedented efficiency. The integration process will take months, Marshall explained, but preliminary analysis suggests that we'll have access to technologies that could solve every major problem facing human civilization. Clean energy that makes fusion reactors look primitive, medical techniques that could extend human lifespans by centuries, transportation systems that could connect every human colony in real time. Marcus thought about his crew, still unconscious in the corridor above. What happens to us? To the people who started this mess? Marshall considered the question carefully. That depends on what you want to happen. The precursors test wasn't just about stopping exploitation. It was about rehabilitation. The opportunity for people to choose a different path. The team leader accessed her own tactical display. We're going to need people who understand how criminal organizations operate. The successful completion of the precursor evaluation We'll make Earth a target for every ambitious faction in human space. Having someone who can think like our enemies would be invaluable." Marcus laughed despite himself. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a chance to help protect humanity's future," Marshall corrected. "The same way you protected it tonight." Looking around the chamber, Marcus could see teams of humans and precursor technology working together with growing harmony. The artifacts were sharing their secrets willingly now, responding to researchers who approached them with respect rather than greed. The future that was unfolding before his eyes was worth more than any heist could ever yield. "My crew, Sarah, Jake, Victor, they're not bad people. They just made some poor choices. The rehabilitation programs that are going to be possible with precursor medical technology," the team leader said, "will be able to address psychological and social factors that lead to criminal behavior. If they're willing to participate, they could have genuine opportunities to start over." Marcus looked down at Colonel Hayes, still trapped in the crystalline containment field. "What about him?" Marshall's expression darkened. "He chose to try to destroy what he couldn't steal. The precursors have less patience for that kind of mentality, but even he'll have opportunities for rehabilitation if he's willing to accept them." The obelisk pulsed with a new pattern of light, and suddenly Marcus could hear something that sounded almost like music. Not audible sound, but something that resonated in his thoughts, conveying meaning without words. Images flooded his mind, the precursors' last days, their decision to seed the galaxy with technology and tests, their hope that someday a worthy successor species would prove ready for partnership. "They're still here," Marcus whispered. "Not physically, but their consciousness is embedded in the technology. They've been waiting and watching for thousands of years." Marshall nodded. "And now they've decided that humanity is ready for the next phase of our development. The question is whether we'll prove worthy of their faith in us." Marcus looked around the chamber one more time, seeing it not as a treasure vault to be robbed, but as a classroom where humanity would learn to reach for the stars. The path that had brought him here, from bank robber to unlikely hero, was just the beginning of a journey that would reshape human civilization. The test was over, but the real work was just beginning. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Research Station Alpha, watching as the first human ship equipped with true precursor technology prepared for its maiden voyage to distant stars. The vessel looked nothing like traditional human spacecraft. Its hull seemed to flow like liquid metal, and energy patterns danced across its surface in ways that suggested it existed partially outside normal space-time. The transformation of human civilization had been swift, but not chaotic. The precursor technology had revealed itself gradually, offering new capabilities only as humanity proved ready to handle them responsibly. Every archaeological site had become a university where human scientists learned to work alongside alien wisdom that had been waiting patiently for the right students. "Nervous?" Marshall asked, joining Marcus at the observation window. The tomb guard wore new armor that seamlessly blended human engineering with precursor design principles, creating equipment that looked more like art than military hardware. "Excited," Marcus replied. 6 months ago I was planning to steal jewelry from a bank vault. Today I'm about to help establish humanity's first embassy to the Centauri Collective." His role as special advisor for criminal threat assessment had evolved far beyond what anyone had expected. The successful completion of the precursor evaluation had indeed made Earth a target for every ambitious faction in human space. But it had also attracted attention from alien civilizations that had been watching humanity's development with interest. The Centaurians are particularly intrigued by our approach to the precursor technology, Marshall said. Most species either worship it as divine or try to exploit it for immediate advantage. Humans are apparently the first to treat it as a teaching tool. Marcus thought about his crew, all of whom had chosen to participate in the rehabilitation programs. Sarah had discovered a natural aptitude for xenoarchaeology and was now working at one of the research sites on Mars. Jake's technical skills had found new purpose in developing interfaces between human and precursor computer systems. Even Victor had found his calling as a security specialist protecting archaeological sites from less enlightened treasure hunters. The precursors left us more than technology, Marcus said. They left us a philosophy. The idea that true advancement comes from cooperation rather than domination, from preservation rather than exploitation. The ship before them pulsed with gentle light as its precursor-derived engines came online. Unlike the violent energy signatures of traditional fusion drives, this technology seemed to work in harmony with the fabric of space itself, creating fields that allowed faster-than-light travel without the devastating environmental costs of earlier methods. Incoming transmission from the Andromeda Deep Space Array, an AI announced. The voice belonged to one of the precursor consciousness fragments that had emerged from the technology, offering guidance while respecting human autonomy. The main display activated, showing a star map that stretched across the entire galaxy. Dozens of new signals were appearing, each representing a civilization that had detected humanity's successful completion of the precursor evaluation. Some were offering trade agreements. Others proposed cultural exchanges. A few were requesting assistance with problems that required the specific combination of human adaptability and precursor technology. Remarkable, the AI continued. The galactic community has been waiting for a species that could successfully integrate precursor technology without losing its essential nature. Humanity appears to have achieved this integration while actually strengthening its core characteristics. Marcus smiled at that assessment. The months since the evaluation had indeed strengthened humanity's essential nature, rather than changing it. The technology had amplified human curiosity, creativity, and compassion while providing tools to address problems that had seemed insurmountable. Diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia were yielding to medical techniques that worked at the quantum level. Environmental damage was being reversed using terraforming principles adapted for restoration rather than conquest. Captain Chen to all stations, came a voice over the ship's communication system. Marcus turned to see his brother David, whom he hadn't spoken to in 5 years before recent events brought them back together. David had been selected to command the first diplomatic mission, his military background and recent experience with alien technology, making him ideal for first contact situations. All systems showing green, David continued. Precursor navigation array is synchronized with our destination coordinates. We are go for departure in T-minus 60 seconds. Marcus watched as the ship's hull began to shimmer with energy patterns that seemed to reach into dimensions beyond normal perception. The precursor consciousness had explained that their technology didn't just move through space. It temporarily elevated matter into higher, dimensional states where distance became conceptual rather than physical. You know what I think makes humans special? Marcus said to Marshall as they watched the countdown proceed. We're the only species that ever looked at someone else's tomb and decided to become worthy of their respect rather than just taking what we could carry. Marshall nodded thoughtfully. The evaluation reports from other species make for sobering reading. Civilizations that could have been our equals, if they had made different choices when they encountered precursor technology. The Altarians tried to weaponize everything they found. The Vegan Confederation attempted to sell access to the highest bidders. The Sirius Alliance broke apart fighting over who would control the artifacts. And humans? Humans decided that the technology was too important to belong to any one group, too dangerous to use without understanding, and too valuable to waste on short-term gains. Marshall smiled. We're apparently the first species to voluntarily establish international oversight committees before we even knew what we were overseeing. The countdown reached 0, and the ship before them simply faded from existence. Not with the violent energies of traditional space travel, but with the quiet elegance of matter transitioning between states of being. Within hours it would arrive at Proxima Centauri, carrying not weapons or trade goods but art, music, literature, and mathematical proofs. Humanity's attempt to introduce itself to the galaxy as a civilization worth knowing. The precursors left one final message, the AI announced. It has been unlocked by the successful completion of humanity's first interstellar diplomatic mission. The observation deck filled with soft light, and suddenly Marcus could feel the presence of minds that had spanned the galaxy when Earth was young. Not invasive or overwhelming, but welcoming, like the feeling of coming home after a long journey. The message came not in words but in understanding, flowing directly into their consciousness. Children of the Third World from Sol, you have proven worthy of the inheritance we prepared for you, but more than worthiness, you have shown wisdom. You chose to become guardians rather than conquerors, teachers rather than tyrants. The galaxy has been waiting for a species with your particular combination of ambition and restraint, curiosity and caution, strength, and compassion. The tools we left behind are yours now. Not as a gift, but as recognition of what you have already become. Use them well and remember that the greatest treasures in the universe are not taken but earned. As the presents faded, Marcus found himself thinking about the path that had brought him here. A simple bank robbery had become something far greater. A test that humanity had passed not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through the simple decision to protect rather than exploit, to preserve rather than destroy. So what's next? Marshall asked. Marcus looked out at the stars, knowing that human ships equipped with precursor technology were already preparing to carry Earth's culture to distant worlds. Archaeological sites throughout human space were revealing new wonders daily. Research stations were developing technologies that would transform human civilization while preserving its essential character. We proved that their faith in us was justified, Marcus said. We become the guardians they trained us to be, and we make sure that when the next species finds precursor technology, they find teachers waiting for them instead of tomb robbers. The observation deck's lights dimmed as the station rotated to bring them a view of Earth, hanging blue and beautiful against the star field, somewhere down there. In a renovated facility that had once been Storage Facility 7, new classes of tomb guards were learning to work alongside technology that had waited millennia for the right partners. Marcus had started the day as a bank robber planning a simple heist. He had ended it as guardian of humanity's greatest treasure, the future itself. And for the first time in his life, he knew exactly what he was meant to do with the rest of it. The stars were calling, and humanity was finally ready to answer.